afternoon, viewers, and welcome to yet another interesting episode of 15 Minutes in WACSI. Today, we have a special guest in the capacity of Mr. Charles Vandyck. Mr. Charles Vandyck is the head capacity development of the West African Civil Society Institute. Today, we are going to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on the work of civil society organizations. Mr. Vandyck, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jervin. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yes. So for those of us who don't know what the West African Civil Society does, please could you tell us what you do?
Okay, so West African Civil Society Institute is WACSI for short. It's a regional organization in terms of coverage. It covers the 15 ECOWAS countries plus Cameroon, Chad, and Mauritania. So what we do is we strengthen the civil society ecosystem. That means all the elements or components within civil society in terms of actors, organizations, and institutions. We strengthen it through several approaches. One of the approaches that we use is capacity development, which is training and follow-on engagement, which is mentoring, coaching, learning and reflection, communities of practice, etc. We also do a lot of knowledge production and documentation. So we document issues that affect the sector broadly, and then of course issues that civil society contributes to within that sector. And then we also do connecting and convening. So we convene civil society actors, we also convene civil society actors with other stakeholders like the private sector and the public sector. The focus of our work is, like I said, is the ecosystem, but we look at 4 issues mainly. The first issue we look at is resilience and sustainability. We look at the enabling environment for civil society. We look at how do we strengthen civic leadership itself, and then we also look at technology. So those are the 4 sectoral issues that we look at as an institution. So basically that is what.
Okay. So how would you say, in your having worked in the field for this number of years, do you think that the civil society organizations were prepared for the corona pandemic?
I think that's a very good question. I think, honestly, to be honest with you, I'm not sure any sector was prepared for this pandemic. It came, like we say in Christendom, like a thief in the night, right? So we were all unprepared, and I think many of the organizations have gone through so much trauma because of the pandemic, especially the smaller organizations that just don't have that kind of supportive infrastructure and resources. So we're talking about the organizations, they may be NGOs that are based usually out of the urban areas, in rural areas, and then of course the smaller CBOs, the community-based organizations, the self-help groups, the associations that just don't have that infrastructure, don't have reserves, and we're not ready for the restrictions. We're not ready for the funding cuts, the extreme funding cuts that happened for many of their donors. Of course, there were larger NGOs that had the infrastructure, they had the reserves, they were able to transition into that virtual world, they were able to find a way to keep afloat. So it has been quite damaging for the sector, and the damage has been quite long term, right? But in the midst of also all these things that have happened, there's also been opportunities. And a lot of organizations have seen the opportunity of leveraging on technology and strengthening their ability to use technology because of virtual engagement. There's also been a much more deeper focus on resourcing and sustainability. And then there's been much more, should I say, research on issues around civic space. So the enabling environment issues, which have been also growing exponentially and even deepened more during the pandemic in terms of attacks on freedoms. So those are the opportunities that have come out of this. These have been put onto the agenda, and I believe in the long term will make civil society much more stronger.
Okay, so if I get you correctly, you are saying that the impact of COVID-19 on civil society organizations has not been the same. So it has impacted others more than it has impacted others, right?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yes. So your organization, the West African Civil Society, what would you say some of the how have you been affected as an organization?
I think that's a very good question. And so because of the role WACSI plays as that sort of like bridge, as that facilitator, as that connector, as that capacity builder, I think what has happened is that as the pandemic hit, our relevance had been given more preeminence. So you notice that people have begun to understand the importance of an institution like WACSI, that basically should I say focuses on strengthening the sector and is not necessarily thematic driven, right? And so because of that, WACSI has got a lot more attention, because many foundations and many other funders came to us and said, look, WACSI, can you then support our organizations, especially help them with the transition into remote working? Can you strengthen their technology capacity? Can you help them develop strategic plans? Can you strengthen their sustainability? And so our role became more important. So the effect on us has not been severe because of that in terms of resourcing. We were also prepared, much more prepared for the transition to the virtual space. We started investing strategically into technology adoption and building skills of staff in 2018, right? So to some extent, it was a bit prophetic. It's almost like we knew something was coming. And so that transition from face-to-face engagements to virtual has been a little bit more smoother for us.
So if I get you correctly, you're saying that WACSI's prominence has increased, so to speak. You found opportunity in the midst of this pandemic. And so the question then is, how did you get to this particular position? How have you positioned yourself in the past, and how has that affected or given you a lot of credence right now?
Yeah, so our executive director has been very intentional and deliberate. So Nana, that's Nana Fajan. I remember some years ago, all the way from 2011, she always said that we needed to focus a lot more on issues of sustainability and resilience. Right? She always said that we need to look at the whole ecosystem. We started talking about these issues way before they were popular and sexy to talk about within the space.
So, yes.
Yeah, we started talking about funders investing in capacity development, in sustainability grants, long time ago. Right? So I think we are being, should I say, responded to based on our investments that we've made over the years, both intellectual investments and other types of investments in these conversations. And so when the time came, you know, it became so obvious that this was the institution that you needed to partner with to some extent to respond to these challenges, because they have built some expertise over the years, right? And so this is what happened. So it's about being prepared. I think we really prepared, and we stayed focused to our mandate of really strengthening the sector and not getting distracted into and tempted into becoming thematic driven. I think that is what has helped us.
Okay. So to those organizations that are watching us currently and are reeling from the impact of Corona, what solutions, practical solutions, can you offer them to help them to survive at least the pandemic?
Yeah, I think one of the things that Corona has forced us to do is to think strategically. I think a lot of our organizations were very much what I call reactive. They wait for something to happen. When the thing gets out of hand, then they try to scramble to survive. So we're always on survival mode. What the pandemic has showed us that we cannot be on survival mode. We need to be more future thinking. So we need to be proactive. So one of the things is to do more intensive strategic planning, but beyond the strategic planning, making sure that you're actually taking action. The sad part is that there are some good strategies, but nobody implements them. You understand?
Yes,
so do the planning, but take action, right? And then another thing you need to look at is the governance, right? We need to look deeply at the role of our boards or oversight sort of mechanisms. Many of CSO boards are not functional. I always say that they are decorative. They are put there to fulfill a certain legal regulation. But the board members are not really engaged in a way that they can help the organization grow. So we need to look at they need to look at boards and say, look, how can we grow our boards into resourcing boards? Boards that can give us resources, boards that can help us with sustainability, boards that can help us with strategic thinking, right? So that's another area. Another area is technology adoption. We cannot run away from the use of technology, right? And so we need to embrace it. So how do we get civil society organizations to embrace the use of technology for their work, to improve efficiency and effectiveness within their organizations themselves, but also to improve their ability to collect data for advocacy, right? To be able to engage with their constituencies, right? To have the tools to do their work. If you don't have a laptop, you don't have computers, you can't really do a lot of the work that you're doing, right? So embracing technology is important. And then fourthly, planning for sustainability from the word go. So sustainability should now be ingrained in our minds that no matter what project we do, both organizational level and project level, we need to think about sustainability from the word go. How are we going to sustain the organization or sustain an initiative beyond the terminal period? Who is contributing what? What is the contribution of an organization? What's the contribution of a community? Right? Yes. How do we get other donors to support? And not only traditional donors, but even donors domestically and potentially private sector donors. So thinking about sustainability more deeply. I think that when we do these things, it will help our organizations to become much more resilient, stronger and robust. If we don't do these things, we'll go back to survival mode and we'll probably disappear. So it's at this point, it's a do or die situation.
Okay, great. So you mentioned technology, and you mentioned the whole discourse about sustainability. Now we are in a space or we're in a West African sub-region where the cost of technology is so high.
Yeah.
So how? What would you advise civil society organizations to do, especially those ones that want to embrace or incorporate or integrate technology into their work? Do you have any solutions that are practical that they can?
No, that's a very, very good question. I think, for example, in WACSI we have the Tech Soup program. One thing that's good about the Tech Soup program is that it provides a vast array of opportunities just beyond access. So first of all, if you're a charity or if you're an NGO, what happens is that you can access software at a very subsidized price. But beyond the access of that software, you are given a specific guidance on how to utilize that software. And so for me, that's a great opportunity, right? And the program is now growing to look at how do we provide hardware. And we've done that already to 40-something organizations. Right, we provided over 100 and something computers during the pandemic time, right? The conversation is now even going beyond that to look at digital resilience, right? Digital security, right? Remote working capacities, right? Technology planning, right? So integrating these skills in the way organizations do their work. So this is a specific and practical way opportunity that can be done. Then of course, when you go online, like for in Nigeria and in Ghana, there's the Google for Nonprofits that provides all sorts of tools that you can use. And I think we need to start being more inquisitive, going online and leveraging on certain free tools that will help us improve our efficiency and especially the credibility of our data, which is key for us to be able to do advocacy and influence things, right? So those opportunities are there. But of course, there's also, I know you probably mentioned it, internet connectivity and infrastructure problems that as civil society we may not have any control over directly. Yes, there is. There's still so many problems with internet connectivity. So we need to think deeply on how we can come together as civil society to do some advocacy on making sure that the access to the internet becomes a right in the true sense of the word. Sometimes it looks like it's still a privilege, right? But in the true sense of the word, it should become a right. So how do we get governments to invest more in internet infrastructure to make it even more cost effective and accessible, right? We need to do a lot more advocacy at that level, right? So these are some of the things I'll say. But for me, for the change to really happen, there needs to be a shift in the mindset. You know, there's a lot of phobophobia. You know, phobophobia is probably the fear of fear, but yes, there's the fear of fear of technology. There's so much phobia when it comes to technology, right? Yeah, so that phobia, we need to set it aside and look at it and embrace it and look at our environment and apply what we can apply.
Okay, so let's bring back the conversation to the COVID-19 pandemic. How would you describe the roles civil society organizations have played in the process of alleviating or dealing with
the pandemic? Yes. No, that's a really good question, Jervin. And that's just before I get into the roles. Sadly, I think this part of the work that we have done has not been amplified in a way that really positions civil society to citizens enough. I think citizens have become more aware, but not enough. So, for example, the kind of engagements, the places that civil society actors went during the pandemic at the peril of their lives to provide essential services to citizens, for me, was remarkable. In almost every country within the continent, there were actors, there were community actors that were going around providing food, providing basic essentials where other people were not going. The INGOs could not come into our space. You know, they were restricted. So the local organizations were doing this work. So we played a big role. We played a big role in awareness raising about the whole pandemic, the education around it, in terms of protecting ourselves. Society played a big role in partnership with the media in many countries, right? In terms of even the technical expertise on how to manage this whole pandemic, you had society health experts who played significant roles, right? So there were countable roles that we played in terms of responding to the pandemic. Apart from that, there was a lot of research that we have done, like documentation. So WACSI did a whole research on the impact of COVID on CSOs in 6 West African countries. Valuable data, right, to show contributions of CSOs. We did a research on local giving within that pandemic to show how our philanthropy or our giving infrastructure is evolving and how the pandemic has helped that to bring that more to the limelight, right? So there were so many roles that we played, and I think for a very long time the citizens felt the impact of CSOs. I've seen in Ghana much more connection between citizens and CSOs and much more respect for the work that we are doing right now. And I think not only in Ghana but in many other places where citizens are beginning to realize that we are actually to a large extent representing their interests, right? And we are their voices.
Well, talking about voices, a lot of money has been poured to fight the pandemic.
Yes.
And particularly governments in West Africa have received a lot of money from the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, and other multilaterals and donors. What would you say, and there's been a lot of voices talking about how governments have not been accountable, have not shown value for money and the disbursement or the use of these funds, COVID funds for mitigating the adverse effects of the pandemic. What do you think has been the role? What has civil society done to put government on its toes?
Fantastic. So if you look across many countries, there have been organizations who work in the health space who have produced accountability reports on the COVID funds. How these COVID funds, first of all, were dispersed and how they were spent. And unfortunately, it doesn't make good reading. There have been a lot of alleged malfeasance and, just plain corruption when it comes to the COVID funds. I think what civil society needs to do is to make sure that they follow through to ensure that those who spend these monies in a way that they were not meant to be spent face the full rigors of the law. In certain countries, there are attempts that are being done to ensure that government officials that dip their hands in the COVID funds face the full rigors of the law. Recently, we heard about what's happening in South Africa, with the health minister. We are hoping that these things are replicated in all our countries, there's a deeper investigation into some of these things by the appropriate government agencies to ensure that people face the full rigors of the law. Because remember, most of these money, apart from the fact that it came from the Bretton Woods, which is factual, but we also made internal contributions. I remember in Ghana, individual companies contributed, individuals contributed, churches contributed, mosques contributed, right? Civil society also contributed. So this is taxpayers' money. And so taxpayers' money needs to be accounted for by a government. And we need to insist, we need to ensure it happens. We need to make sure that those who use this money in a way that was not supposed to be used face the law.
Okay.
I think that's extremely important.
Okay. So we are almost getting to the end of our conversation, and you've spoken at length about WACSI and the work that you do. So for viewers out there who want to work with you, how do they get in touch?
Yeah, so WACSI, I mean, our general email is info@WACSI. When you send that to us, our colleagues in comms redirect and we can get in touch. We have a couple of phone numbers. If I say I know them off head, I'm probably lying to myself. But info@WACSI is the best bet to get in touch. So info@wacsi.org. But we also have social media platforms. If you go through our Facebook platform, which is West Africa Civil Society Institute, you can get in touch through that. We have a Twitter handle, WACSI. We have a YouTube page. We're also on LinkedIn. So there's different avenues for you to get in touch with us.
Okay. And for those who are based in Accra and want to come to the office directly, where do they find you?
So we are number 9 Bamboo Street, East Legon. Yeah, not far away from American International School and Christian Center. Okay.
Yeah. Well, viewers, you've heard from the man. It's been a very interesting session, shedding lights, insights on different aspects that border on COVID-19 and how it has impacted the civic space and civil society organizations in particular. Mr. Charles Vandyck, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you,
we hope that you come around next time when we invite you.
Yes,
all right,
thank you so
viewers, thank you for staying with us. This has been your lovely host, Jervin Chanase, and hope to see you soon. Cheers.